Hello YouTube and welcome to the nation of free to play. I'm Mr. Mondstadt and today I want to talk about a topic that many Genshin players struggle with a lot and that affects FTPs the most. I want to talk about how to choose which characters to pull for on your account. Let's go! One of the comments I get the most often is, who should I pull next patch? Is Furina or Nefer better for me? Should I save for Columbina? What's better, C1 or R1? While I do try to answer as many comments as I can, I think it is very important, especially for low spenders or FTPs, to learn how to make a decision on who to go for and who will most likely bring the most value to your account. In this video I will talk about all the different factors that should be part of your decision making, as well as share my personal long-term pull strategy with you. First things first, I want to start with a disclaimer. This video and the process with it is targeted towards a meta and endgame centered approach. That means that if you have a brain rot character that you must get, or you only pull for characters you like and do not care about Stygian Onslaught or Abyss, this video might not help you as much. Personally, I would consider my account a mix of both worlds. I do care about the current meta in order to be able to continuously clear all endgame and make guide videos with tips and tricks on those challenges. While I would love to do all of that with my favorite units, it is simply not possible. On the other hand, I also pull for my brain rot characters, even though they might not help my account that much. Yoimiya is one prime example of that. I did pick her up on the Inazuma Chronicle, knowing that she will not help me in any of the endgame formats, but I have been saving for her for so long and I'm very happy to have her now. However, for most of the 5 stars I am summoning for, their power level is my main motivation. If the same is true for you, then this video will hopefully help you in making your pull decisions from now on. For newer players, this process is relatively simple, to be honest. If you just started playing Genshin and want to move on to the endgame as fast as possible, I would pick one of the recent top damage dealers in the game and get a team for them. In my opinion, these top damage dealers right now are Mawika, Skirk, Varessa, Flins and Nefer. While choosing your main DPS, have a look at how many 5 stars they want for their elite team. Mawika wants Citlali and either Xylonen or Yansan with some constellations. Varessa wants C6 Shavroos and C6 Yansan, or Furina and Cloud Retainer. Skirk wants Escoffier and Furina, Flins wants Inefer, Nefer wants Lauma, and even though we do not know anything for sure at the time of recording this, I would not be surprised if they would also synergize very well with Columbina later on, simply because I doubt that Aino will remain their best in slot for forever. With all of that said, you already see that all of these units want at least one other limited 5 star in their teams. This is important to keep in mind when you are going for a new damage dealer. But what if you have been playing the game for quite a while already? If you are a more experienced player, you probably have a bunch of 5 stars in your account. And if you care about the meta, you probably have some good teams as well. My account is over 2 years old by now and I do have Mawika's elite team with Xylonen, Bennett and Citlali. I also have Skirk, Escoffier and Furina. Recently I got Mualani and Lauma, plus I have Neviette, Emily, Kazur, Nahida, Raiden, Ayaka, Arlecchino, Hutao, Yoimiya and all the standard 5 stars of course. Depending on how much you pull, how long you've been playing and how lucky you are, you might have more or less, but you definitely have some units to work with. Now, if you want to go for a new character, you should keep in mind on how this new unit will affect your other characters and whether they will work with them or not. Let's take Furina as an example. If you own units like Neviette, Skirk, Wriothesley or Navia, she will improve all of their teams significantly, so getting her might be a good idea. If you have Arlecchino, Flins or Lauma, Furina will not add as much value to your account and Nefer might be the better choice for you. Or you could save for future units that might prove themselves more useful. However, and this is another important aspect to keep in mind, rerun units are usually not as high of a priority in terms of meta compared to new 5 stars. I'm not saying that new is always better, but let's just say every Genshin unit has a meta lifespan, so to speak, and for most characters that is not longer than 1 to 2 years. See, when I started playing the game, Nahida was one of the strongest characters you could get, but if you're starting now, Lauma is a clear upgrade to her. The same is true for Arlecchino and Mavuika, Raiden and Beressa, Kazuha and Xylonen, you get my point. Most new units are pretty good on release, but all of them will lose in value the more patches come, and at some point they are no longer worth getting in terms of meta. And yes, this will happen to everyone. If you think Mavuika will never be power grabbed, give it 2 years and see what happens. So, if you're pulling for meta, that also means you have to keep pulling to keep up with the game. Of course, some characters last longer than others, and usually supports last longer than DPSs, which brings me to my next point. As a general rule of thumb, I would prioritize supports over damage dealers, since supports are usually not bound to one team. Citlali works in many teams even without Mavuika, so does Xylonen, so does Escoffier without Skirk, so does Nefer without Flints, and so does Lauma without Nefer. That is why I went for her, but not for Nefer. That does not mean that they won't lose in value over time as well, but they will still be useful in other teams even after they got power grabbed. On the flip side, you cannot play the game with nothing but supports, you need some damage dealers. However, in the last year, Hoyo has changed their strategy when it comes to selling DPSs in the sense that almost all new carries need at least one specific support. So you're not pulling 1 5-star, but at least 2, and usually back to back with only a couple of weeks between the banners. What makes this even more difficult is the order of release. So far, the support was always released before the damage dealer. Escoffier dropped before Skirk, Nefer before Flint, and Lauma before Nefer. So how can you know which support you need before their banner ends? To be honest, I'm a bit surprised by this strategy because it is very difficult to keep up this way, and it would be way easier if the DPS came before the support. However, the way things are right now, you kinda have to make an educated guess. Of course, there are some other content creators out there who do cover speculative information as soon as a new beta version starts. While I do not recommend to rely on leaks when you make your pulling decision, it can be useful to follow Hoyo's patterns closely. For example, if a new support unit is released and some parts of their kit do not really make any sense yet, well, that's probably because the character who's supposed to profit from that is not out yet. One recent example, Lauma's crit buff to Lunar Bloom when your party is in Ascending Gleam. On her release, no other unit could trigger Lunar Bloom, but by now we know this passive was designed for Nefer. To speculate a bit myself, if Alice will actually be a playable character in the near future, as was indicated by the Notcry trailer, I would not be surprised if she works well with Nicole, another Hexen Circle member who was also in the trailer. Again, we don't know anything about either of these two witches, and all my yapping now might be proven wrong in a couple of months, but what I'm saying is, be aware of Hoyo's strategy and act accordingly. Adjacent to the topic, also be aware of who will release in the next couple of months. The Notcry trailer teased more units, for example Durin, Vaka or Syndrome. Personally, I would potentially be interested in all 3 of them, which is why I'm not pulling a lot right now, even though I have over 50,000 primos saved. If all of these characters would actually be playable and perhaps even depend on some other 5-stars, you can burn through these fates very quickly. You might be in a similar position like me and would want all of the upcoming characters as well, but unfortunately we will not have enough primos to get everyone we want. In this case, one good and meta weight filter is to look at the new unit's element. Of course, we only know this for certain after the drip marketing, But during the Not Quite trailer, for example, you could clearly see that Lauma is Dendro and Alice is Pyro and Vaka is Anemone. The point I'm trying to make is that you should see what your account needs the most. I do have many Pyro damage dealers on my account and also have Hydro and Cryo carries, but I do not own a Geo or Dendro DPS nor an up-to-date Electro or Anemone one. Sorry, Raiden. When it comes to enemies who favor these elements, I am cooked. So when I decide to go for a new DPS, they ideally are of these elements that I am lacking. Also, no offense, but it does not make sense to go for Navia or Wanderer anymore, so I will instead wait for the next power update and try to get them instead. Now, you could ask, if you don't have a Dendro DPS, why are you not pulling for Nephro? Fair point, but Nefer wants Lauma, and while I do have Lauma, you can also play Lauma without Nephro. Yes, the DPS numbers are slightly worse, but practically speaking, I have a very strong Dendro unit that will cover 95% of scenarios where I need to play Dendro. Getting Nefer will add a little bit of value to my account, but not as much as a Geo or a Nemo DPS, as I would not gain a new team from Nefer. Instead of playing Lauma Hyperbloom, I would play Lauma and Nefer, but I do not win an extra meta team. If I get a strong Anemone or Geo DPS and maybe their best in slot support, I would have an entirely new team core on my account, which seems like more value to me. And should I be wrong, then I could still get Nefer on her rerun. However, I expect Geo and Anemone to get a DPS update soonish, as Navia is almost 2 years old already and Wanderer and Xiao are the only 5-star Anemone carries. No, Chaska does not really count, as she does not really do Anemone damage. So, with all that in mind, let's summarize. When you want to decide on who to pull in the next couple of patches, you should inform yourself on who is likely to become playable soon. Of course, if you have your eye on a rerun unit, you can simply look up their kit already. If not, think about their potential element and how they could help your account. Also, be aware of the possibility that you might need to get a second limited 5-star for their best performance and save your pulls accordingly. Generally, newer units will last you longer than older ones and supports will have more value than DPSs. Try to have a good balance on your account, especially when it comes to elements. Ideally, you have one meta team for every scenario. I did not do the best job here myself and am now stuck with many Pyro units, but I mostly play more weaker in endgame scenarios. That's why I want to get an Anemone, Geo and Electro team over the long run. Let's see what Hoyo gives us. Lastly, one quick note on early cons and weapons. It is a fair question, especially if you want a carry and miss their best in slot support. In that case, getting their C1 or signature might make up for the damage loss. However, generally speaking, I recommend more limited characters over cons or weapons, especially with the way Imaginary Theater and Stygian Onslaught is going. As long as you have the right characters, you can clear any endgame except Dire with C0 R0, so the only time you actually need vertical investment is if you want to go for the time-gated weapon skins. For me, no motivation at all. This is my personal take though, and if you want to know more about horizontal and vertical investment in Genshin, check out my more detailed video on that topic. And with that, this brings us to the end of this week's video. I hope this video will help you in making your pulling decisions in the future, and if so, please leave a like or subscribe to my channel. Also, if you want to share your thought process on who to get and or are looking for some advice, just leave a comment down below. Plus, if you want to share your decision making process on who to pull, feel free to do so as well. Thanks again for watching, good luck on your pulls, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!